It was so triggering and so uncomfortable. I couldn't get off the phone fast enough. And I just felt all the emotions and the tears came, and it was like surging, energy surging through your body, because it's like emotions, you don't know what to do with them. It's your mum telling you that one of the biggest nights of your life was a disappointment to her, and a celebration of everything that you are is a disappointment to her.
From Mamma Mia, you're listening to No Filter, and I'm Mia Friedman. Today you're going to hear the extraordinary and deeply moving story of someone who's about to become one of the biggest stars on Australian television. Narelda Jacobs is a proud Whadjuk Noongar woman from Perth. And if you're from WA, of course you'll already know her because she's been on your telly for 20 years as a reporter and a newsreader. But recently she's made the big leap to national morning television on Channel 10's Studio 10. There is so much to Narelda's story: a strictly religious upbringing, 4 older sisters, a teen pregnancy, a shotgun marriage, a divorce, and so many more plot twists. Something else that you should know is that Narelda's father was part of the Stolen Generation and went on to become a minister in the Uniting Church. That in itself is an incredible story. Narelda and her partner moved to Sydney a few months ago for this brand new chapter in her career, and it's been hectic and exhilarating and at times absolutely overwhelming. She came into the Mamma Mia podcast studio to record this in person with me after weeks of anti-racism protests around the world, and as an Indigenous woman speaking out about racism on national television and social media, living in a new city on the other side of the country from her family after months of lockdown, the first thing I wanted to know was, how are you doing?
I'm great. Look, I am loving getting my hands dirty in this conversation, but it is hard. It's really hard going.
Are you tired?
I'm pretty exhausted, yeah, because it's emotionally draining. All the conversations that we're having, while I'm just loving that it's front of mind for the entire country, it's draining because it's just constantly trying to win hearts and minds. And that's really difficult, especially when it's something that's so passionate to you and when you just see it as a no-brainer, and you want everybody to come along. And when they're not agreeing with you and they're fighting, they're attacking you or worse, defending, that's when it just gets really draining and you start to think, well, what's the point? But then, we see messages of support, online on socials and allies come forward from, unlikely places, and you think that's why it's worth it, because there's a lot of people there behind us that want the change.
I heard people during Corona, people who had anxiety, say that strangely they felt less anxious during Corona because the whole world was anxious. As someone who has lived this experience your whole life and these issues are so in your everyday life, is there a degree of relief that, everyone's suddenly talking about something that that we've always known about?
It's validation and it's vindication. And unfortunately, it's taken something to happen overseas for Australians to kind of get on board and think, this is something that we really need to look at. And there was a sense of national pride on the line, I think, because when the whole world was looking at what each other was doing in terms of standing in solidarity, if we hadn't stood in solidarity, then the rest of the world would have been saying, where are you, Australia? Don't you have any issues here? And so it was a sense of national pride. And while people, can attack and defend their position and that sort of thing, I think secretly they would have been proud that we were standing in solidarity.
I've heard a lot of women of colour and people of colour say, we're exhausted, don't ask us to educate you, which is something I really understand, because it must feel, I don't know how it feels, but having all these white people suddenly go, can you explain that to me and explain that to me? And, over 400 Indigenous deaths in custody and no charges laid. And what about black women's hair? How does that work?
Right.
All of those things.
All the things. Yeah.
And does it feel exciting or exhausting or both?
What is really funny is when you see someone you haven't seen for a little while, or maybe it's someone that you have seen a lot of, a non-Indigenous person, and they have just finally done some research and they've suddenly, educated themselves and they're telling you, like, you're finding out for the first time. So
did you know, Narelda?
Did you know? Exactly. And so you just kind of you don't want to discourage, so you just take it. You just take it and go, yep. Mm-hmm. And then it's only kind of afterwards, and you kind of add to what they're saying. Then they're like, oh, that's right. You have been saying this all along. And what really excites me though is just being a part of the conversation, because we're seeking out Indigenous voices to have the conversation, and we're realising we can't have the conversation without the Indigenous voices. And I think now we are seeing that is so apparent, that need is so apparent, because how many opinion pieces have we read in the paper where the word Negro is used, and the word Aboriginal, which is a noun for Indigenous people in Australia, is written with a lowercase a.
Can we do a quick glossary?
Yes.
Aborigine, Aboriginal person, Indigenous person, First Nations person.
Mm-hmm. I think Aborigine is out because it's so from a bygone era. We're Aboriginal people. We are Indigenous people. When you want to refer to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander, you use the word Indigenous because we have two Indigenous people in Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. So when you're referring to, someone like I am Aboriginal, I'm not Torres Strait Islander. You can call me Aboriginal. I'm an Aboriginal person. When you're speaking to someone from the Torres Strait, they're a Torres Strait Islander. When you're speaking about the collective, it's Indigenous. You can also use First Nations.
What's the difference? Because people get very nervous that they'll say the wrong thing and then be inadvertently offensive. Do you have a preference?
Well, I'm a Whadjuk Noongar for starters, from the Swan River region of Perth, and so that's who I am. That's what I will always say. I'm a Whadjuk Noongar, but I'm also an Aboriginal person. I'm an Indigenous woman. I'm also First Nations. I don't really have a preference. But when you say Aboriginal person, just say it with a capital A, because then you'll get used to writing it like that. It's not Aboriginal with a lowercase a. That's offensive in itself.
Tell me about your wedding day.
Oh, Mia.
We shift gears. Tell me about Narelda on her wedding day.
That was a different – well, actually, it was the same person. I wasn't able to be myself. I was 18. I wasn't particularly happy. I wasn't a blushing bride on my wedding day. I remember almost getting ready. I was in my dress. I had my makeup and my hair done. I was in a room just on my own. Everybody else was still getting ready. I was sitting on a stool, not wanting to ruin my dress, and I was sitting on my own, and I kind of just – I just had this feeling of I was just numb. I didn't really feel anything. I was just like, it's almost like get ready for the show, because I was pregnant. My dad was a reverend of the Uniting Church. My mum was heavily involved in ministry. So just to give you an idea of why the wedding took place, I was 3 months pregnant. It was organised very, very quickly. I have said this before. My mum organised the reception venue before I was even proposed to. So that's how how
it's
quickly
almost like you didn't have a choice.
I didn't really have a choice. And, as an 18-year-old, I really looked up to my parents and my mum, and I respect my mum. My dad's passed now, but
I'm so sorry for the loss of your father. It was 2 years ago, just recently, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. I still respect their opinions, but I don't let them rule my life as they did when I was 18.
What was telling your parents like?
Well, 6 months. So Jade was born 6 months after the marriage. And then it was when she was about 6 months old that the marriage kind of fell apart. It fell apart, and we separated. We divorced soon after that, and it was just like, why am I doing? Like, we shouldn't have got married.
Did Jade's dad want to get married?
No, not really. No, and he was doing the right thing, and he would say that to people. I'm doing the right thing. I mean,
18.
The warning signs were all there. Yeah.
And what year was it? Because it wasn't like it was the 50s. The idea of having to get married, you came from quite a religious family, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it was about 93, 94. I mean, I don't even know the date Is that telling? I mean, I was 18. I would have left school shortly after that. It was probably a couple of years after I left school, and so it was about 90. It was about 94, 95. I mean, Jade was born in 95, so that's the only reason I know it was 95, because that's when Jade was born, and when did I leave school? So, yeah, it was. We were in a much more progressive society than my parents were when they got married. And my mum always, holds it up that it was an interracial, union, and it was difficult for her then.
They both had pretty life-changing experiences when they were about 7 or 8, but in very different ways. Can you talk about what happened to each of them?
My mum came out from Ireland with her parents and her younger brothers and sisters on a ship. They came out here. Her parents were missionaries, and they ended up being missionaries in Kalgoorlie, and then worked their way back to Perth eventually. My dad was stolen from his family. They were picking grapes. They did seasonal work, as everybody did in those days, or the Noongar people did in those days. And while the parents were in one end of the vineyard and the kids were playing at another, he described the cars pulling up, and they were effectively snatched and put in the car and driven away. And my dad would tell the story of, it was the magistrate in the end that sent them away to Magumba Methodist Mission. And my dad remembers hearing his mother scream. She wasn't even let in the courtroom to be able to argue the point. Where are they going? Why are you taking them? So that was my dad's childhood, and he never saw his parents again. They both sadly died while he was in the mission, while he and his 2 younger brothers were in the mission.
How old were his younger brothers?
Well, he was 9 at the time, so they would have been 6 and 3 maybe.
I looked at a photo you posted on your Instagram of the little boys at the mission, one of whom was your dad.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so young, and they were dressed in their uniforms, and they were trying so hard to smile. And I just felt so heartbroken when I looked at that photo. Your father, you've said that your father raised you without bitterness.
Mm-hmm.
All I can think about is those little boys and girls crying themselves to sleep every night, wanting to go back to their parents. What were they told? Who raised them? What was their life like?
Dad never spoke of being, abused in the mission. It wasn't a question of, them being abused. The injustice was inherent in not being able to see their families again. But the little kids were really, resourceful, and they became each other's family. And my dad would tell us of how they would fantasize about their parents coming, their dads coming and bringing them a brand new bike. And they would say to each other, when my dad brings me a bike, I'll race you to the end of the street. It would be like that. But they would tell them.
They never stopped hoping.
They never stopped hoping. And Dad, at the same time he would talk about things, it wasn't like it was just this open conversation that we could have at any time, because it's very emotional. It's very emotional. It's very triggering. But he found comfort in Christianity, and he became a reverend of the Uniting Church.
He had happy memories too, didn't he? There was a time that he was served tea.
Yes, The mission that Dad went to had it was government owned in the beginning, and it was a horrendous place. Then the Methodist Church took over, and the superintendent and his wife were actually quite lovely people, from what I've heard. I mean, so nice, in fact, that Mum and Dad were married by the superintendent. When they got married, and so you wouldn't bestow that honour on someone that you didn't like. So the superintendent's wife, when my dad and his 2 younger brothers came into the mission, and because they were just enforcing government policy for the day, it wasn't like it was a prison or a jail. So the superintendent's wife sat them down. She had prepared a table with pots of tea and little cakes and sandwiches laid out with a lovely tablecloth, and she apparently said that she wanted to treat all the children like that because one day they might grow up to be leaders, and she wanted to treat them, she wanted to honour them as children, and that kind of set the scene for the rest of their time in the mission. And my dad did become a leader, and he became a very highly respected man who was dedicated to improving the life of Aboriginal people all over the country. We grew up knowing that Dad was stolen, and he was part of the stolen generation. He was a survivor. It was part of who we were. We always had compassion for our cousins and our people. One thing I do remember, though, of my dad's mother, which is really heartbreaking, is that she tried desperately to fill the gaping hole that was left when her 3 youngest children were taken, and she had 5 pregnancies. 4 were stillborn, and 1 died at 2 months old. And so she had just a horrendous time when my dad was taken away. My older aunties, my old nanas, would say that, she died of a broken heart. So I think we can only honour her hardship and her life and what she went through, and not want any, sympathy, or, we don't want guilt, and we've never looked for that. We've always been independent and financially independent, because we just want to be able to honour their memory and to tell them, look, from your hardship, this is who we are now.
Was Sorry Day a very emotional day for him when Kevin Rudd delivered the apology to the stolen generation in Parliament?
My dad was there with his mission brothers and sisters, and they're really beautiful people, and it was a momentous day. It was a huge day to hear that apology and to hear it on behalf of the whole country. It meant a lot. And now for me personally, it means more now that my dad is not with us. So this year was particularly going into Reconciliation Week, and then the Black Lives Matter movement, the resurgence of it. It meant so much more this year.
Mm. So you had Jade.
Mm-hmm.
You decided that marriage was not a good idea.
Yes.
You parted ways with Jade's dad.
Yep.
How is your mum going with all of this? Because I should say your parents met through church.
Yeah, my mum was a pastor. My mum was a pastor of a Noongar church in Perth.
She was very progressive.
She was so progressive, my mum. And that's why I respect her strength as well, because, that was at a time when an Irish woman was working with Aboriginal people, and she was one of them. She was equal. She wasn't a saviour in any way, and she certainly wasn't, like I probably shouldn't stereotype missionaries, but she wasn't, even her parents looked down upon her being with an Aboriginal man. It was that kind of thing. She was their equal. She lived. Her housemates were Noongar women. So she really was one of the people in the community that she lived with, and so she was a pastor there. And so my dad, that's how they met, because my dad started going to that church.
Did she ever talk about what drew her to work in that area?
I think she just saw the injustice that was going on and the discrimination, and she wanted to try and help and save lives. My mum's all about saving lives so people don't go to hell.
She's deeply religious, which we will get to.
Yes.
But you had to, after your poor mum had the shock of, Mum, I'm pregnant at 18, Mum, I'm getting divorced at 19.
Yes, yep.
What was the next difficult conversation you had to have with Margaret?
Mum, I'm gay.
Margaret's not having a good time.
No, it was all in the space of 3 years, actually, all those really difficult conversations. The coming out happened when I was 21.
When did you realise?
Oh, like primary school, high school. But because we were told, gays were going to hell and AIDS had been sent by God to punish the gays, I grew up believing that. If you're told it, you believe it as you're growing up.
You internalise that homophobia.
And so there's a fear there. It's like, I'm not, why am I attracted to this girl in school? Or, you don't realise. You don't sort of put a label on it or realise what's going on. You just have feelings, but you don't know what to do with them. So it wasn't until I was 21 that I decided I've got to I've got to live an open life with my family and let them know.
Who was the first person you told?
I told some of my sisters. I've got 4 older sisters, and I told my older sisters.
You're the baby.
First, yes, because I thought, let's just test. Let's just test the water here.
Were they, obviously they were brought up in the same household, were they as sort of strictly religious as your parents?
Look, there's one who's a born-again Christian, and I couldn't face her. I couldn't tell her, and she read about it. Mm. She read about it in the paper. I just couldn't face it. And even now, I can't talk to certain members of my family because it's just, we're never going to agree. You
can't talk to them at all, or you can't talk to them about
this.
But it's kind of like, well, this is who you are. So what other conversations are there really?
Well, yeah, exactly. But
how'd it go with your other sisters?
Well, it went great. They were amazing. I mean, my older sister, her son is the most flamboyantly gay man you would ever meet, and so it's been a sort of a generational thing of sort of chipping away. So that, and now Elisha, he's just so flamboyant and just unapologetically himself. It is so beautiful to see, and he's pushing the boundaries. I won't. It took a long time for me to be affectionate with my partners in front of my family. That's how much it is. But he doesn't care, and it's beautiful.
How did you tell your mum?
Well, I sat her down. Because I'd been Marion had been my friend for 3 years, and Marion would come to all of our family functions, even Christmas and birthday dinners and things. And Marion was a great friend. A great friend. And she was well liked and loved by all of my family as my friend. So one day I went over to my mum's and I said, Mum, I've got something to tell you. I had to pluck up all the courage in the world, and I sat her down and I said, you're going to need to sit down for this. And I said, well, Marion, she's not my friend. She's my partner. And my mum immediately said, well, how long has this been going on? And I said, 3 years. And she said, well, it's going to take a lot of undoing, isn't it?
Oh, Narelda.
It's going to take a lot to undo. That's what she said. And I said, well, it's not a matter of undoing it. This is who I am. It's, and she cried. She cried.
Did you cry too?
I cried too, yeah.
I want to cry just hearing about it. Must have felt like such a deep rejection.
It really was. And actually I was 23. I would have been 22, 23. Well, I mean, the beautiful thing was that the conversation ended with her saying, I will never be able to accept your sexuality, but you will always be loved. And it was a compromise. It was a really great compromise. And she said, you'll always be welcome here. And for me, that meant everything. Not to have the acceptance, but to have the love, that was enough. I mean, I love to hear stories when families are completely accepting and of the whole thing. But at the same time, I wasn't ostracised from the family, and that would be worse because it's, when you respect your parents so much and you need their love, if they were to turn their back on me, then I don't know. I don't know what life would have been like.
In your fantasy of how that could have played out, for anyone who might be listening who has someone in their life come out to them, what is the best possible thing to say in that moment?
Why'd you take so long to tell me? Because people know, and my mum deep down, I think she knew. My older sister said to me, well, we thought so, that sort of thing. So it's almost like you build it up in your mind to be something that's bigger than the reality sometimes. And for a lot of people, it's not a shock. They're often it's often you're the last to know sometimes, So I would just say you've got to live your truth. And once you open up, it's like this huge burden is lifted and the weight is lifted and you're suddenly free.
What were those 3 years like or those 2 years where you were with Marion but you couldn't you couldn't tell anyone, you couldn't be who you were.
Well, you were just so scared of being found out. Just so scared. Jade was one when Mary and I started going out. Mary and I worked together. We started having lunch together, and then lunches were really I was just looking forward to having lunch every day. I was looking forward to going to work to have lunch every day just so I could see Mary and spend time with her. And then and then it kind of developed from there. But Jade was one, and because I would call Mary and all the pet names like Babe, for example. In front of my dad, Jade waved goodbye to Marion one day saying, "Bye, babe, bye, babe," in front of my dad. And so we were like, be quiet, be quiet. So it was those little moments where you just didn't want to be caught out.
Yeah, and carrying the stress of that must have been enormous.
It just felt like it would destroy them, knowing and being a part of conversations. Like when I was growing up, we had Fred Nile over for dinner one time.
No.
Yes.
Oh, my God.
Yes. They are the circles that we ran in.
It's like the patron saint enemy of the LGBTQI community.
Yes.
So diversity in all its forms.
So you would be part of these conversations and listening to these conversations and, you were just terrified of people finding out.
Oh, what about your dad? How did he go with it?
I never told him. No, I couldn't face him.
I never told him.
Well, he obviously knew. My mum had the conversation with him, but we had a really beautiful moment. I know it sounds bizarre, doesn't it? It sounds really bizarre. Like I just couldn't. I don't know. I'm daddy's girl.
I don't think any dad wants to sit down and talk about his daughter's sex life in any form.
It's uncomfortable. And it's particularly when you're daddy's little girl,
Yeah.
But we did have a beautiful conversation when the marriage equality vote happened, and it was yes. And my dad phoned me and said, "Oh, Mum's told me it's a yes, the yes vote." I said, "How would you feel about me getting married or Elisha getting married?" And he said, "I just want my family to be happy."
Oh, that was his way.
That was his way. And that I have held on to that conversation. That is just a precious, precious conversation that was just between me and my dad. And it was a really beautiful moment. And I shouldn't have been scared to talk to him about it.
I don't want to pry, so tell me if it's too personal, but the time of the marriage equality vote was such a difficult one in some families where there were, people whose parents or whose siblings were voting no and who were outspoken about their no vote. You've compared your mum in her views to Margaret Court before.
Yes,
Would you still stand by that? Quite vehemently opposed, not just
sharing Facebook stories and on how non-binary people who identify as non-binary are all the negative things you can think of. Children of LGBTIQ plus people are not of God, and all the things that Margaret Court said. My mum totally agrees with. My mum's name is Margaret. She even looks like Margaret Court. That's just to paint a picture. I love my mum. At the same time, I love my mum.
She's still a pastor like Margaret Court is.
Yeah, she's involved in ministry. Yeah, she has people. She speaks at church every now and then, and yeah, she has a ministry. And she still posts things every now and then. Or what she does is she reposts things that other people say, and particularly about sexuality.
Narelda, how do you teach me about tolerance? Because I'm not gay, but I would want to cut someone off in my family if they did that.
It's really difficult, and my nephew Elisha really grappled with that.
Yeah.
He really grappled with it. And I think it stems from that conversation of we will tolerate but not accept. And that was enough for me. And it probably shouldn't have been enough if it wasn't enough for me. And I have had to put my foot down.
It's a low bar, isn't it?
It's a very low bar. And I've had to put my foot down with my mum because as I have gotten older, it's not worth it. I need to I need to educate people within my own family and tell them that I'm not happy anymore with just tolerance.
Yeah.
And the conversation came after this Mardi Gras, actually, after Mardi Gras this year.
Which you hosted.
Which I hosted. And I hosted it the first time last year. I didn't even tell my family why I was coming to Sydney. I was still living in Perth then. I didn't tell them why I was coming to Sydney. It was just I was coming for the weekend, and it was up to them to see that I was hosting Mardi Gras. But it was this year, Mardi Gras. You know, I didn't have the conversation with any members of my family. My mum phoned me the Monday after Mardi Gras, and I phoned her back a couple of days later, and she said, I'm all chirpy. I'm on top of the world. I've had a fantastic weekend.
Yeah.
You know, the eyes of the world were on us, and it was an amazing
Gay
celebration.
Christmas.
Yeah, it's Gay Christmas. And I get to be in the box seat of it, with Joel
you get
Tracy
to be like with Santa practically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And Courtney Act and Zoe Coombs Mars, the four of us were like best buddies, you know. So I phoned my mum all chirpy, and this is the voice I hear, oh, lovey. So talk about, knocking the wind out of your sails. I'm like, what's happened? Oh, it's what you did on the weekend. I'm just so disappointed. It was so triggering and so uncomfortable. I couldn't get off the phone fast enough. And I just felt all the emotions, and the tears came. And it was like surging, energy surging through your body, because it's like emotions, you don't know what to do with them. It's your mum telling you that one of the biggest nights of your life was a disappointment to her, and a celebration of everything that you are is a disappointment to her. That's really hard to take, and that's what people who are in our community have to deal with. That's what queer people in our community have to deal with daily. It's not a unique story. It's what connects us, and it's what gives us our thick skin. And it's what makes us live an open life that is free. And I'm getting it from my own mum. I have had the conversation with her since about how I'm not, going to be treated any differently or any less than because of who I love and who, I want to marry potentially. And she has taken a step back, and she's respected that. But you really need to set some boundaries with your loved ones if they don't treat you as they like everybody else.
How does it play out with your partners, with Marion, with your partner now, Stevie?
Stevie, yes.
I haven't done any light stalking at all, honestly. I haven't looked at photos of you two together at all. But how does it play out for them? Because without wanting to delve into their personal situations, like after you told Marion was welcome in your family house as your friend, once your parents knew that it was a different situation, was she still welcome? Because your partner has to take that on as well, doesn't it?
It's really interesting. Marion was also from a Christian family, a Catholic family, staunchly Catholic. So she understood the boundaries. So we actually didn't have a problem not showing affection in front of the family, and she completely understood. So that was fine. There was like we go to the Jacobs house, and it's fine. And also, but she's kind of like another sister, I guess, Marion, and she still is. She still comes to family functions, and she's still seen as a member of our family because we were together 15 years, and she was like a mother to Jade.
Babe.
She was a babe. Yes.
She was babe. Mum and babe.
She was a disciplinarian for Jade a lot of the time as well.
Wow.
So there's that really beautiful, motherly, mother-daughter sort of thing going on there between the two of them. And then Stevie is she's 11 years younger than me, and she's just got this huge
How old are you?
heart. I'm 44.
Are you?
Yeah, I'm 44, yeah. And Stevie just has a big heart, and it's difficult not to just love her, because she's just so beautiful, and she's so giving and generous with her time, and she listens so well, and she feels everything, and she's a creative, and there's nothing that you can't love about her. She's never been in a situation where her sexuality hasn't been accepted. So it's been a bit of an education as well, because she can't understand it. And I think it's probably with her encouragement that I have stood up to my mum in such a big way.
Because I imagine that I would be so hurt and angry if my husband's family hadn't accepted me and hadn't accepted him. But it's very hard to be angry and hurt on someone's behalf, isn't it? You have to.
Mm-hmm. And I think with Stevie especially, showing our affection on social media has been a really big deal.
Really?
And also
for you?
For me, to let people in to see private me has been a big step, and it was something that I had to come to terms with because all those years that I was a journalist and a newsreader at 10, I didn't let anyone see my personal life on social media. It was
how much of that was the journalist and how much of that was the woman who was gay?
Probably the woman who was gay, actually. Yeah, and it was Stevie she's opened my heart. She's softened my heart, and through that I can see that people genuinely love.
Oh, so much. So much. Because it's just a good, happy story.
And I want to share that with people.
Yeah.
I want to share that, because I don't know, it's hard to – I just really liked being private. But you unite people when you let them in.
And also what they say, you can't be what you can't see, right?
That's right, yeah. And if anybody is, not wanting to come out or – scared about coming out or scared about showing the way they love people, don't be, because there are so many people out there who want to see it and want to share in that joy with you.
Does it feel exhausting, though, having to be a role model? Does it feel heavy sometimes?
Well, you haven't seen me on a Saturday night. I'm certainly not a role model then.
That's what kind of role we're talking about, really.
No, I mean, even then, because you just want to have fun with your friends. You just want to.
But I don't even mean that. I don't mean having to be pure. I just mean being there.
Yeah.
Being on the stage, being in the arena.
I don't feel the weight of it. What I do, I just feel the weight of constantly having to find words in this current conversation that we're having about, Black Lives Matter, Indigenous Lives Matter, equality matters. And because my whole motivation, and it's everything that my dad stood for, is to, win hearts and minds by using delicate diplomacy. And it's really difficult to find your words because depending on what audience you're talking to, you want to win them over. You want for them to be a part of the change that we're seeing in the country, and to constantly be thinking almost strategically. I can't be.
Do I sound too angry?
Do I sound too angry?
Yeah.
Am I going to come across like an
alienate people?
An angry black woman? That's what you don't
want.
And
that's a stereotype in itself, isn't it?
Yes.
It's incredibly damaging.
Yes, and even if you say it in a nice voice, your words still get twisted, and that's what's exhausting to me. Living my life how I want to isn't tiring at all, but it's constantly searching for the right words to say to win people over. That's what's hard.
You were a news presenter at Channel 10 for 20 years in Perth, and you had a very high profile over there. The decision to switch, like Sarah Harris did, from journalism to opinion and now in Studio 10, most people wouldn't understand what a big decision that is, but it's pretty enormous.
Oh, Mia, and I probably didn't realise how big a decision it was because I know exactly the difference now. For all that time as a journo and then a news presenter, for all that time, you don't share your opinion.
No, not about anything.
We were never allowed to go to protests.
A lot of people wouldn't know that. Journalists aren't allowed to go to protests.
You're not allowed to protest.
At many news organisations.
You're not even allowed to speak politically about anything political.
You're not allowed to tweet out hashtags.
Exactly.
In many cases.
That's right. So people don't know you in that case. They don't know who you are as a person. As soon as I stepped out and shared opinions, the first time I did it was for January 26th, which was my own story about how I came on board to wanting to change the date. And it was a very personal story. No one could really attack a personal story.
Oh, I'm sure they could.
You thought? On the whole, people were like, "Oh, I see her point."
Oh, that's good. So it was received well.
It was received really well. It was the first time, mind you, The second time, or one of the next time, the whole Mardi Gras thing, that was a bit confronting for people. Then it was Sorry Day. I then again shared the story of my dad being stolen. No one can really attack a personal story. It's when you start to hold a mirror to society that is open to attack.
And when you advocate on behalf of others, I've heard you talking about David Dungai's family and his death in custody, and when you've been speaking about, George Floyd and the Indigenous Lives Matter, has that been different? Has that been received differently?
It has been received so differently, and I felt it really strongly last week. We were reacting to some breaking news from Minneapolis. The Minneapolis City Council had voted to defund their police, and we were having a conversation about that. And to stand in solidarity with the people of Minneapolis, who I had in good faith that they knew what was best for their community. I wanted to support them, and so I said, well, if that's what it takes.
You were put on the spot.
I was put because it was breaking. We were reacting to it. If that's what it takes, and everybody was like, what? Defund the police? What? Them go without any police? And I kind of said, well, they're obviously thinking that they're there for one section of their community, but not the other.
And you explained that really well, but the pull-out headline was Narelda Jacobs, Studio 10 says abolish all police.
That's right. And as if I'm talking about our police.
And that's not what you said.
I didn't say that. I was standing in solidarity with the people of Minneapolis. And so it was a headline that got picked up, and I'm still getting tweets about it. And there's still really personal attacks about that,
I'm
and
sorry.
I didn't want to engage. So I didn't actually ever engage and defend, myself. A radio station in Perth picked that up and was saying stuff like, but what about Indigenous police? What about Indigenous police? She doesn't want Indigenous police. And so they kind of went on and on. And I got the clarification the next day online, on air, which was great, but the damage had been done and people are still tweeting about it. I have utmost respect for our police. I always have. I have utmost respect for authority because they're there to protect me and to make sure that I can live the life that I live. What I have a problem with is the systems, that are in place, because it's the systems, and I'm talking about the justice system that are funneling Aboriginal people into lockups and prisons when they're not meant to be there. It's the health system that may be treating Indigenous people differently from everybody else. It's the education system that providing learning in line with the rest of the curriculum that isn't appropriate for little Aboriginal kids and Torres Strait Islander kids necessarily.
So systemic.
It's systemic
inequality. I like what you talk about in terms of a funnel.
Yes, because there are people in lockups that aren't charged. Why are people arrested? We've seen a couple of times. There was this case in Adelaide, just in recent times where he was pulled over for not wearing a helmet on a bike, and he was
another woman that was drunk on a train.
She ended up dying.
That was devastating.
There are a lot of people out there, and deaths in custody have arisen from people who shouldn't have been in the lockup to begin with. So that's the systems that we need to break. We need to maintain our respect for people in uniforms because they're there to protect us.
One of your fellow panellists is Kerry-Anne Kennelly.
Mm-hmm.
Your mother is – I was about to say your mother is Margaret Court. She's not, but she's in that ballpark. She's in that arena. She's on that court. We're in such a polarised world, which is something you're probably more even aware of now that you're moved into this space of commentating. And it's gone from I disagree with what you say about that thing to you are an evil person, you need to die or you need to be silenced. Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you, I've read that you said you have the utmost respect for Kerry-Anne. You and she disagree on many things. You said the same about your mother. How do you juggle that? How do you say, I disagree with you about that, but I don't think that you should be thrown off the face of the earth? Because people need to be respected, and I have so much respect for
Kerry-Ann. She's a veteran of the industry, and a lot of people see her as royalty. She's television royalty in Australia, and there are a lot of people who agree with everything that she says. And at the same time, she gives me space to say what I need to say. And that's the mutual respect that we need to give each other. And you just have to put facts out there. And if you can win each other over on various things, then so be it. If you don't, then, you know, we live with each other.
A lot of people are talking about how we can be better allies to our LGBTQI plus community, to our Indigenous communities. How can we?
You are a fantastic example, Mia. You are an absolutely amazing example because...
You don't have to say that. That was not a leading question. Tell me how good I am. No, seriously, because I feel like we can always, everyone can always do better. Like,
because every time you read a tweet of someone attacking you and being really personal, there is a better tweet that comes out to support you. And that is what we hold on to. If you only were told that you're, you know, get rid of you, your opinion doesn't count, you're an idiot, she wants to defund the police. Well, let's let's send some people around there and get her to phone police and see what the police are going to do, you know, that sort of thing, you know.
That's illegal. I hope you went to the police about that.
Oh, well, I just don't engage, you know. But
it's amazing what we learn to put up with, and you know.
Yeah.
It's ugly out there. I can't even imagine what it's like for you.
It matters a great deal when you have some support from someone that hasn't necessarily walked your walk, because they're saying, I get it, you know, I understand, and we need to change this country and we're in this together. And Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people make up 3% of our population. We need the 97% of everybody else to get on board and help us change. There are only 800,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Australia. We can do this. What might not mean anything to you in your life will make a great deal of difference to us. You know, so we need to put some disclaimers on some statues and rename some things.
Yeah.
Understand that things that we see on TV offend. Once we do that, we will be able to change intergenerational trauma that's out there. We will make people less angry. We will have systems that treat everybody equally and are there to see everybody succeed, and people will be less angry.
I wish you could have been in the room with me talking to Narelda. She has that something, that charisma that the most successful and lovely celebrities and big stars have. It's a very special mix of self-assurance and warmth, generosity and humility. You can see her, hear her thoughts on what's going on in the world at the moment on Channel 10 several mornings a week on Studio 10. And if you're in Perth, she's still reading the weekend news via Zoom. Well, it's not via Zoom, it's probably via some other more fancy technology, but you can still see her on the telly. And run, don't walk to her Instagram. She is really good on the gram. Also, if you're in Perth, Narelda's daughter Jade Dolan is an Aboriginal artist with Whadjuk Balladong Eastern Arunda heritage. She delivers a cultural education in an interactive way for corporates and community events or schools. She'll come into the school. She's a lady startup and we want to support her, so we'll put a link to her business in the show notes, because if there's anything that the world needs right now, it's to listen and learn to First Nations people about their lived experience and culture. And Jade's programs do exactly that. Until next week, friends, take care.